Obadiah. And we got down through about verse number 9 last time. I'm going to just start, I should just start in verse number 10 tonight. That'll be good enough. We got down through verse number 9. Start reading verse 8. Shall I not in that day, saith the Lord, even destroy the wise men out of Edom, and the understanding out of Mount Esau? Thy mighty men, O Teman, shall be dismayed. Teman is a famous city in Edom where wise men were supposed to dwell. And the idea is the wisdom that the Edomites had, that they should have had, that they professed to have. Jeremiah 49, we've looked at that verse repeatedly, that said it's gone. And the wisdom that they should have had, Esau was Jacob's brother. You recall our studies about that. And Esau understood what the Abrahamic covenant was all about. He understood, in fact, he had sold that birthright to his brother. He understood what it was. He despised it, and he passed that hatred for the plan and purpose of God through Jacob. Jacob and Esau were twins. When he was born, God gave the prophecy, the elder shall serve the younger. So he knew what God's will was. He rebels against it. And so God says, thy mighty men, the ones who are going to try to stand up against the plan and purpose of God, shall be dismayed, to the end that everyone of the mount of Esau may be cut off by slaughter. Literally, God's going to slaughter, and that's murder rate. They're mad at some presidential candidate for talking about carpet bombing ISIS. And I'm thinking, carpet bombing, wasn't that a term that comes out of World War II? Isn't that pretty much what we did to Germany? And isn't that pretty much what they did to England? I mean, it's like, people just discovered carpet bombing. Okay. You haven't seen slaughter yet in that part of the world till this happens. Verse number 10, for thy violence against thy brother Jacob, shame shall cover thee, and thou shalt be cut off forever. So the slaughter that God is going to end the Arab-Israeli conflict. The Edomites we've studied this, the Edomites' modern-day representation are the Palestinians. They're called the Tabernacle of Edom, back in Psalm 83. They're the refugees of the Arab refugees that are brought to the border of Israel, verse number 7 talks about, and that are used by the other Arab nations as an excuse to try to exterminate the nation Israel. And God's going to bring that Arab-Israeli, that perpetual hatred that goes all the way back to Abraham, Isaac. Abraham had a son, Ishmael, who hated his brother Isaac. His mother, Hagar, she hated Sarah. And that hatred that started back there, sin complicates life. And when Abraham, instead of trusting God to give him the seed, he goes out and makes the mistake of having Ishmael on his own. That started a line of hatred in that family. Esau, Jacob, that hatred is passed on. Esau goes down and marries the Egyptian. Hagar was an Egyptian, marries into that family, that dynasty. And that hatred starts there. And Ezekiel 35 says it's a perpetual hatred, comes all down through history. And God's going to end it. And that the conflict you see over there now is that perpetual hatred. And he said, I'm going to end that perpetual hatred by destroying the Arabs, the Edomites, and the coalition that's using them, those 10 nations there in Psalm 83. He's going to destroy them. And he's going to do it for thy violence against thy brother. And when they do it, shame is going to cover thee, and thou shalt be cut off. And that's two things. And we looked at this last time. The shame and the cutting off, because He's going to completely destroy the Arab Confederacy against Israel. Now, when he does it, we've looked at this, and Obadiah's been kind of making us see this. The thing that perpetuates, the thing that justifies their hatred of Israel And the thing that maybe I should say, the thing that drives it is their hatred of the Abrahamic covenant. Now, the Abrahamic covenant is a covenant that God made. So if you're going to hate what God did in that covenant, you're fighting against God. That's why Psalm 83 talks about, they hate you when they're going to destroy us. So there's a religious underpinning in that hatred. Modern day, the religion of the Arab nations that try to destroy Israel is Islam. And he's literally going to destroy the Arab nations in such a way, with such a terrible, violent slaughter, that it's going to cause the destruction of the underpinning under the Arab-Israeli hatred, and literally it's going to destroy Islam in the boot. Zephaniah 2, we've looked at it, where he talks about he will famish the gods of these people. When you famish somebody, you starve them. You know, if you're famished, you just starve them. And he's literally going to starve them out, because people are going to say, hey, if this is what happens to people that follow you, forget it. And it's literally going to put an end to all of that. And then he's going to cut them off with the slaughter. So the shame, the embarrassment, what's going to happen in this thing, it's going to leave a lasting impression, not on just the Arab world, but the whole world itself. And we looked at the passage last time in Ezekiel 35, where the whole world, after this slaughter against the Arabs, the whole world rejoices. And they go, whew, we're glad that's over with. And the attitude of the world toward Israel will be, at least it's over now. And there's going to be a respite there for a while. Now, it won't last long, because the other nations, Ezekiel 38, the nations that are not around Israel but that are further up, they'll come because Israel expands their territory. They take over this Arab territory that these Arab nations that they've just whipped and put in submission and slaughtered, wiped them out. And they take over their territory. When you take over the territory of the Arab countries of the Middle East, what do you take over? Well, it's not just sand. It's that, what they call it, dear Beverly Hillbillies, that bubbling brew. I watched a TV show the other night, a movie. My wife watches these old movies. She loves, if it's not about, comes out of the 50s, she doesn't like it. I got a chance. I came out of the 40s, so I guess she'll keep me around. But we're watching this old movie, and it was a Western. And it was about the big bad Sam has come to take little Mary's farm and all that kind of, how they go. But they were trying to find gold. This woman was trying to find gold on this farm that her parents had left her, and the railroad's coming in to get it. And they were pushing everybody out. And it was a stroke of comedy in the movie. But there was this other family that decided we're just going to sell out and leave, because there's all these pits around here, all this black stuff in it, that it just gets all over everything and makes a mess. And then toward the end of it, they're all on the stagecoach going out of town, and this guy says, the guy who's just left this farm with all this stuff, he says, this stuff is really weird. He's got it in a jar. He says, my wife, she dropped a lantern on the ground, and this stuff just all caught on fire. And he said, the whole place is going, and of course, he can't see any use for it. And of course, we look at it and say, duh, if you'd have figured it out then. It's like the guy down in Texas, I forget his name, but he died a bankrupt, lost his farm, he had thousands of acres down in southwest Texas, and he lost it all because of bankruptcy, because it couldn't support the cattle. And people bought it, went into bankruptcy, and somebody went down there and bought it, and within about 5 years of that, they discovered the biggest oil field that the world knew at the time on that piece of ground. So you can have all kind of wealth and not know it, and act like you're bankrupt. Well, that's what these guys are doing. Well, this stuff here is going to be, they're going to destroy them. But when they do, they take over their territory, and they get the bubbling goo, the black gold. And they get a lot of wealth and treasure. And that's why Ezekiel 38 says they're going to come in and plunder, though. There's other nations that are going to see Israel become wealthy. They're going to come in and try to plunder them. But that's subsequent. That takes place after he destroys these Arabs. This hatred, perpetual hatred, Ezekiel calls it, an ancient hatred, hatred of old, goes all the way back to Abraham's time. Obadiah is describing the destruction of that, the end of it. The reason for it is what verse 10 to 15 is going to tell you about. You see how it says in verse 10, for thy violence against thy brother, shame shall cover thee. If you come back with me to Genesis chapter 12, the nation Israel is God's nation in the earth. Now, to use a political term, they're his client nation. And they're his representative nation in the earth. And God's foreign policy, that is his method of dealing with every other nation in the earth, is through the nation Israel. When God deals in the earth, with the earth, and his plan and purpose of the earth, he deals with it through the nation Israel. And he's very clear about how it operates. Genesis chapter 12. And the Lord had said unto Abram, get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee. Now this is God's promise. It's amplified in chapter 13, chapter 15, chapter 18, chapter 28, and so forth. But it's the land of Palestine, the land of Canaan, the land of Israel, called different things in the Bible. But it's the territory that we're talking about in the book of Obadiah. And it says, I'm going to give you the land. Verse 2, and I will make thee a great nation. Now that's what the Arabs are trying to do. They're trying to destroy the nation Israel and take their land away from them. And I will bless thee and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. So what's God's purpose for that land and that nation? He's going to bless the nation Israel, make them great in the land, and then they, in turn, are going to be a blessing to others. So if you believe what God said, what would you do? Well, verse 3, I will bless them that bless thee. So if you wanted God's blessing, what would you do? You'd bless Israel. I'm going to curse them that curse thee. Uh-oh. And in thee should all nations of the earth be blessed. So where's blessing? In treating Israel, blessing Israel. Where does cursing come from? In cursing Israel. And God has promised an in-kind curse to any nation that curses Israel. And so back in Obadiah verse 10, for thy violence against thy brother Jacob, for the hatred, the violence, the striking out that you did to your brother Jacob, I'm going to come, cover you with shame, and cut you off with a slaughter. If you come down to verse 15, verse 11 through 14 describes the violence against his brother Jacob. We'll get to that in a minute, but look at verse 15. For the day of the Lord is near upon all the heathen. As thou, Edom, hast done, it shall be done unto thee. Now he's talking to Edom here. Thy reward shall return upon thine own head. The reward that they get for their violence against their brother Jacob is an in-kind violence against them. They would have sought to, did everything they could to eliminate Israel. God said, you tried it, it didn't work because I didn't let it happen, but you watch what happens to me and see if the God you're trusting can stop me from doing what I'm going to do. And it doesn't work. He gets them. Verse 16, for as ye have drunk after the destruction of Edom in verse 15, upon my holy mountain, so shall all the heathen drink continually, yea, they shall drink. So Edom's going to get destroyed first, and then the other Gentile nations will follow after that destruction. But upon Mount Zion shall be deliverance, and there shall be holiness, and the house of Jacob shall possess their possessions. And the house of Jacob shall be a fire, and the house of Joseph a flame, and the house of Esau for stubble. And they shall kindle in them and devour them, and there shall not be any remaining of the house of Esau, for the Lord has spoken it. Now that's what I talked to you about, the fact that there are literally, in these prophecies, there are two judgments on Esau. One is on the people, and that's what he's talking about there in verse 18, and that's what Psalm 83 talks about. And that's the thing in Ezekiel 25:14 when he talks about God's going to punish Esau with his own hand, and he's going to, with the hand of his people Israel, he's going to punish him. Then later on at the second advent, in Isaiah 63, he comes through the land of Edom, and in Isaiah 63 he says when he does that, he treads the winepress alone, and no man is with him. So this judgment here, where he uses Israel to judge Esau, is one judgment. Then the second advent is another judgment. And one is going to be on the people. He's going to destroy the people, the Palestinians and the Arabs around there. And the other one is he's going to reconfigure the land itself. Because you remember when he comes up through Edom at the advent, he sets, Isaiah 34, he sets the land on fire. And that's where he burns that shaft down into hell, where they can go there and literally look off into hell. Those monuments in the millennium, the graveyard after Armageddon, and the looking down into the souls in hell, and over in Babylon, the zoo over there where they look into the creatures in the bottomless pit, those things are real. And God's judgments are going to be put on display, and the consequences of man's sin and rebellion against God is going to be put on display. And he's going to demonstrate right there in the land. Isaiah 66 says in the kingdom that the nations will come up and they'll worship in Jerusalem, and then they'll go forth and they'll visit the monuments. You know, you go to Washington and you visit the Smithsonian, or you go over and you visit the Washington Monument, or Jefferson or Lincoln, or the Vietnam Memorial, that kind of stuff. All the memorials they're gonna go out and where God's attitude towards sin is going to be memorialized, and God's attitude toward the satanic policy of evil is going to be put on display. There's the consequences of sin and following Satan, and it'll be thy reward. Famous preacher used to have a sermon. He called it "Payday Someday." And it was, does it pay to serve the devil? Absolutely. Yeah, pay to serve the Lord too, but pay to serve the devil too. The wage of sin is death. Be sure your sin will find you out. Whatsoever man sows, that shall he also reap. And in this context, we're talking about the ending of that Arab-Israeli conflict. Now, if you go back to verse number 11, he's going to describe, from verse 10 to 16, he tells you why he's going to judge him. And it's for the violence against thy brother Jacob. It's the reward they get, that in-kind curse for curse, where they've cursed Israel, and then God's going to curse them. And again, the religious undertones of that is God said, I'm going to do it. You know, when he brought Israel out of Egypt, there were 10 plagues. Those 10 plagues, Moses tells them in the book of Numbers, were aimed at the 10 gods of Egypt. The reason there were 10 is because Egypt had those 10 gods, and each one of the plagues was aimed at demonstrating the impotence, the inability, the unreliability of the gods of Egypt. Tommy was just showing me pictures where she was down in Belize, where Kyle, her son, was down there in a race, and she went down to egg him on. That's not the right word. Encourage him on, support him. And she's got all these pictures, and they went up, while they were visiting, they went up in these Mayan ruins, and they see the old temples and stuff. And Kyle was teaching, said, "Come on over here, Mom. Here's a place we'll sacrifice you." Well, she won't do that, but you see the things. And I asked her, I said, "Well, do they have any idea what these things were about?" Well, they said, "Well, no, but what God? What gods were they sacrificing to?" Nobody knows. The Mayans that are there now, they don't know. Has-beens. Left some trinkets, but they're has-beens. Nobody knows them. And that's the way the God of the Bible is. He says, I'm the only God there is. And put up or shut up. Isaiah 42 is real clear. 41 is real clear. He said, if you won't claim to be God, come on, sit down here, we'll talk about it. I'll show you I am. I'll show you my cards, you show me yours, and we'll see who's God. And you know who turns out to be Embarrassed? The other guy, because he can't do it, can't be God. Well, in that conflict with the Arabs, it'll be the same way it was with Egypt. It's there underneath the conflict is that satanic program trying to destroy what God's doing. And so what he's going to destroy in that is the religious underpinnings of it, not just the purveyors of it. Verse 11, in that day, and he's going to describe the violence against thy brother Jacob, in that day, in the day that thou stoodest on the other side, in the day that the strangers carried away captive his forces, and foreigners entered into his gates, and cast lots upon Jerusalem, even thou wast one of them. Now, that verse covers the beginning of Israel as a nation, and that day, in the day that thou stoodest on the other side. Come back with me to Numbers chapter 20. When he said you stoodest on the other side, he's talking about you stood in the way. You stood in opposition. You were on the other side of the issue here. When God brought Israel out of Egypt, in the book of Numbers chapter 20, they come out of Egypt. They're on the way to the land where God had sent them. Numbers chapter 20, verse 14. Moses sent messengers from Kadesh unto the king of Edom, and said, thus saith thy brother Israel, thou knowest all the travail that hath befallen us. So they recognize that they're kinfolks. How our fathers went down into Egypt, and we have dwelt in Egypt a long time, and the Egyptians vexed us, and our fathers. And when we cried unto the Lord, he heard our voice, and sent an angel, and brought us forth out of Egypt. And behold, we are in Kadesh, a city in the utmost of thy border. Let us pass, I pray thee, through thy country. We will not pass through the fields or through the vineyards, neither will we drink of the water of the wells. We will go by the king's highway. We will not turn to the right hand or to the left until we have passed by thy borders. Now, hold your hand there and come with me to Deuteronomy 23. It's just something you need to remember about the Edomites. Deuteronomy 23, verse 5. God is telling the nation Israel here, Deuteronomy 23, verse 7, verse 7, 23, 7. Thou shalt not abhor an Edomite, for he is thy brother. Thou shalt not abhor an Egyptian, because thou wast a stranger in his land. Israel was told, because the Edomite is his relative, he's to esteem him. He's not to be mad at him. He's not to hate him. He's not to abhor him. So when Moses comes there, he says, hey, we're kinfolks. We'll come. Let us pass through. Have a straight passage. They're coming up out of Egypt. And the straight passage into the land would have been through Edom. He says, it won't cost you anything. We won't stop and kill a chicken or kill a cow or drink your water. We'll take these couple of million people and we'll just walk right through. Won't be any problem to you at all. It's not going to cost you anything. Here's an opportunity. You could do what? You could bless Israel. In fact, if you wanted to bless them, what would you say? When you're passing through, stop and we'll kill a cow and have a little jerky together and we'll have a little fun. But no, that isn't what they do. Verse 18. Edom said unto him, thou shalt not pass by me, lest I come out against thee with the sword. Now, that's the reference back here to stoodest on the other side. You're standing there, you're going to fight. Their attitude toward the nation Israel is not one of brotherly love, or even peace. Their attitude toward Israel hasn't changed anywhere along the way. They're still in opposition to what God does in the nation Israel. That ancient hatred, perpetual hatred, is still there in the downline, in the descendants. Verse 19, the children of Israel said unto him, we will go by the highway. If I and my cattle drink of thy water, then I will pay thee, pay for it. I will only, without doing anything else, go through on my feet. And he said, thou shalt not go through. And Edom came out against him with much people and with a strong hand. Thus Edom refused to give Israel passage through his border, wherefore Israel turned away from him, and the children of Israel, even the whole congregation, sojourned from Kadesh and came unto Mount Hor. And you're going down through there. Now, God uses all that and so forth for the training of Israel. But my point to you is about the Edomites here. Their hatred was right there when they had the opportunity to bless Israel. What did they? When their first contact with Israel as a nation came on the scene, what did they do? They said, you step on our ground, we'll fight you. You step on our territory. By the way, who had God given that ground to originally? That ground that they're saying is theirs belonged to God. And the Abrahamic covenant in Genesis 13 extends Israel's borders through that land. That land literally belonged to the nation Israel. Long before Esau was born, he knew who that land belonged to. And they're fighting against it. Now it's interesting, just for an aside here in Numbers, when you come over to chapter 22, the children of Israel set forward and pitched in the plains of Moab. And when they came to Moab, Balak, he hires Balaam. You remember Balaam. And he hires Balaam to go out and curse Israel. But God won't let him curse him. So when Balaam tries to curse Israel, God says, nope, you can't curse him. You have to bless him. And if you look over at chapter 24, when Balaam gives, there are 4 times Balaam gives a prophecy about Israel. He wanted to curse them. God wouldn't let him. But he turned the curse into a blessing. And the 4th one is over in chapter, hold on. Sorry about that. Chapter 24, verse number 15. He took up his parable and said, Balaam the son of Beor hath said, and the man whose eyes are open hath said, he hath said, which heard the words of God, and knew the knowledge of the Most High, which said in the vision of the Almighty, falling into a trance, but having his eyes open, I shall see him, but not now. I shall behold him, but not nigh. So he's saying, I'm going to see him. I'm going to tell you something about what's going to happen in the vision, but it's not for right now. This is something for the future. There shall come a star out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel. Now you notice that word star and scepter are proper nouns. Those are names. Those are names for the Lord Jesus Christ. And shall smite the corners of Moab and destroy all the children of Seth. And Edom shall be a possession. Seir also shall be a possession for his enemies, and Israel shall do valiantly. So Balaam tells them, hey, they wouldn't let him go through the land. You know what's going to happen? That land that Edom thinks he owns is going to wind up in the possession of Israel. Now they learn that, they hear that from the prophet Balaam way back here in Numbers. They live. Now Esau is the one who had the prophecy, the elder shall serve the younger. He rebelled against it. His descendants have the prophecy, they rebel against it. So when you come back to Obadiah, I mean, you can understand that there's some stuff going on here that they're going to get a reward for. Obadiah verse number 11. In the day that thou stoodest on the other side, you're going to stand against Israel. They come out of Egypt. You're not going to let it. You're going to oppose God bringing them into their land. In the day that the strangers carried them away captive, his forces and his foreigners entered into his gates and cast lots upon Jerusalem. Even thou wast one of them. Now, when Israel went into captivity, they come out of Egypt. Then you have all their history, and they go through those 5 courses of judgment, and they come to the 5th one, which is captivity. So what verse 11's done here is it starts with Egypt and goes all the way to the captivity. Edom's hatred of Israel starts at the beginning and goes all the way, and it's amplified when the captivity comes, when they're going into the 5th course of judgment. In the day that the strangers carried away captive his forces, and foreigners entered into his gates, and cast lots upon Jerusalem, even thou wast one of them. So Israel goes into captivity, and what does Edom do? Well, they come in and take over. By the way, if you study in history, the Edomites lived in the land of Edom is on the I don't have a map, but if you had the Mediterranean Sea like this, the Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River, the Dead Sea, Jerusalem is here. Edom is over here on this side. This is east, right? West, east, yeah, this is east. I get so confused. I spent the first half of my life living in Alabama, Mobile, Alabama, and the Gulf of Mexico is south. I moved to Chicago, and we've got this big old body of water over here, but it's east. It ought to be south, but it's east. It's that way, but that, to me, in my mind, that's still. So every time I think east, I have to think about which way it is. North is that way. That's all I really care about. But anyway, here's Edom over here. After the captivity, when Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon's over here, when Nebuchadnezzar came, these Edomites migrate over into this territory. They're called Idumeans. The Hebrew word is Edom. The Greek translation of that is Idumea. And so this territory here, because the land of Idumea, that's where you find people like Herod. In Acts 12, Herod is an Idumean Jew, they call him. He's really an Edomite, but they're Idumeans, and they have that connection. So what they did when the captivity, they literally come in and try to occupy southern Israel. Verse number 12. Thou shouldest not have looked on the day of thy brother in the day that he became a stranger. Neither shouldest thou have rejoiced over the children of Judah in the day of their destruction. Neither shouldest thou have spoken proudly in the day of distress. Notice there's a day of destruction, a day of distress. This next verse is the day of his calamity. That's what the captivity is all about. And when they go into captivity, what are the Edomites doing? They're saying, "Look at what's happening to him!" They're rejoicing. What? In the calamity, they're cursing them. There's no mourning for God's people. There's no cry for the rejection of the truth of God. They're proud. They're saying, "He's getting what he deserves." You know, they're a mess. Verse 13: Thus shouldest thou not have entered into the gate of my people, into the day of their calamity. Yea, thou shouldest not have looked on their affliction in the day of their calamity, nor have laid hand on their substance in the day of their calamity. They go over here, try to take possession of what belonged to Israel. So what's going to happen? He's going to wipe them out, and Israel's going to take possession of them. An in-kind curse for curse. So everything that's going to happen to Esau and the Edomites the descendants of Esau, is happening. You see the judgment that God places on these people. Come back with Psalm 137. These judgments, when you pull these things out of context, and who doesn't do that? You know, you watch this stuff on the TV with all this political stuff going on right now, and I don't care who you are, if you have any kind of mind or heart for truth, and then you hear somebody say something, and then you hear a commentator say he said something that you didn't hear him say. You heard what he said, but now what they say is what he said because they say he said it, and or her, she said it, and that becomes the narrative because that's what they want. Truth's fallen in the street. What do you do about that? God said, I'm going to wipe it out. Things can get so bad that the only answer is wipe it out and start over. Now that's a prediction. Psalm 137. Here's Israel, a tribulation saint, singing the blues. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, yea, we wept when we remembered Zion. We hanged our harps upon the willows in the midst thereof, so they've gone on to captivity. For there they were carried, they that carried us away captive required of us a song. And they said that, and they that wasted us required of us mirth, saying, sing us one of the songs of Zion. So they carried away into Babylonian captivity. That's what we're talking about here in Obadiah. And they say, sing us one of the songs of Zion. Answer, how shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? Boy, that's a great thing, isn't it? I remember years ago when I worked at the mission, there was a fellow that worked around Mobile in the mission work and so forth named Bob Harrington. Was a Baptist evangelist for a long time. And I remember he came to the mission one day talking to Brother Reynolds, and he was going to go to New Orleans and set up a mission on Bourbon Street. And he did. And he got real popular over there. They gave him the title of Chaplain of Bourbon Street. But he went over, and the first thing he did was he rented a storefront. And he rented this little storefront. I went over there preaching on the street and went and saw it. I knew him. And he's telling a story about how that when he first opened the thing up, he said they only had this one little room for him to have, this one little storefront. So he set up his little office in there and his little mission in there, and then he took a record player. Now, this is back in the day of phonograph records. And he said he put records of gospel music on it. And he said he put it out by the front door and he turned it up as loud as it would play. And he said the next day, guy from next door came over and he said, how much will it cost to get you to turn that music off? He ran a house of prostitution next door. It's not real easy to have people visit your prostitutes when you're hearing, what can wash away my sins? Nothing but the blood of Jesus, and in the sweet by and by, and years of spending in vanity. It's kind of hard. Old rugged cross, that kind of stuff. And that was his idea. He said within about 2 weeks, they had given him, he had 3 storefronts where these people bailed out and they moved because he wasn't going to move. Well, music but it's hard to sing the songs of Zion in a strange land. If you're down there imbibing in the world, it's hard to sing. There's a new name written down in glory. You just don't feel like that. My hope is built in nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. You don't feel like that when you're sucking on a reefer or you're trying to snort something up your nose. So that's the idea here. How should we sing the songs of Zion in a strange land? Verse 5, if I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget her cunning. If I do not remember thee, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. If I prefer not Jerusalem above my chief joy. Remember, O Lord, watch, the children of Edom in the day of Jerusalem, who said, raze it, or razz it, tear it down, destroy it, even to the foundation thereof. That's what Obadiah is talking about. See, when the captivities came in, the Babylonians came in, the Edomites are saying, get them, get them, get them. O daughter of Babylon, who art thou to destroy? Happy shall he be that rewardeth thee as thou hast served us. There's that in-kind curse for curse. Happy shall he be that taketh and dasheth thy little ones against the stones. And people read that and say, oh, how terrible the God of the Bible is. But if you go read the record, you'll find out that's what the Babylonians and the Edomites did to Israel. And they're getting paid back as that reward. He's going to reward them as they serve them. The reward, what he dishes out, is only what they dished out first. So when you read these things about God doing these things back here, it's not God just trying to figure out some devious way of torturing people. It's a in-kind response. In fact, that's the way all of the judgments of God are. You know, you see people, they like to quote the verse, nobody knows where it is, but the verse about an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Oh, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Well, first of all, you got any idea where that's at in the Bible? It's in the Bible somewhere. I had a yo-yo just the other day talking to me about some of these things, and that's what he said. He said, it's in there somewhere. And I said, well, where? I mean, you're misquoting the verse. No, I'm not. It's in there somewhere. Well, I might not be getting it right, but it's in. I said, the verse, you've conflated two verses and got both of them wrong. Well, I said, he said, I know it's. I said, well, I know it's not. And I bet I've read the Bible more than you have. In fact, I know where the verses are that you're trying to quote. He said, well, where are they? I said, I'm not going to tell you. Why would I tell you? You need to spend a little time studying looking for them. You don't have sense enough to get a concordance and read a little bit. But I did tell them what books they were in. And that's what people do. They just, it's crazy. Well, go back to Obadiah and get out of that. Thing is, it's that in-kind curse for curse. I'll finish the thing about the eye for an eye. That's in Deuteronomy 19. And when God tells Israel about the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, life for a life, he's not saying if somebody comes up and knocks your tooth out, you can go over there and knock his tooth out. In that passage, what you do is you go before the judge. In other words, you go to the government, you have it adjudicated in a court, and when the judge sentences the person to pay, he's to pay eye for eye, tooth for tooth. In other words, it's an in-kind payment. Now, sometimes it's more than that. If you stole something that didn't belong to you, you could pay back as much as 4 times for everything, a fourfold payment. But the general thing was if you injure somebody, then you pay them back. An eye for an eye, tooth for tooth, life for life, that kind of thing. The judge didn't have he had a guideline as to what he was to do. He didn't look at your tooth and say, well, it wasn't much of a tooth. You can just, go over here and work out a day. No. And he didn't say, well, it was a tooth, so cut your arm off. It wasn't that. There's a reward, and it's an in-kind reward. So when you see God's judgment on these people, the dashing the little kids and that kind of stuff, they're getting back what they gave. Now, people don't like that. Well, give me mercy. Well, let's have justice. We don't need that. Or we don't want that. Anyway, go back to Obadiah. Verse 13, thou shouldest not have entered into the gate of my people in the day of their calamity. Yea, thou shouldest not have looked on their affliction in the day of their calamity, nor have laid hand on their substance in the day of their calamity. Neither shouldest thou have stood in the crossway to cut off those of his that did escape. Neither shouldest thou have delivered up those of his that did remain in the day of distress. So in every way they possibly could, they demonstrate the attitude of being an adversary and hatred. Now, the interesting thing about that is, if you go back with me to Jeremiah chapter 25, when Israel went into Babylonian captivity, God put the nations of the earth on notice that he was going to use some Gentile nations to discipline his people. In Jeremiah 25, we don't have time now to read it, but if you read down the first 14 verses, you'll see that God tells the nations of the earth. He tells Israel, I'm going to send you into captivity, and I'm going to use some Gentile nations. You're going to go down, and you're going to be there 70 years. Verse 11, 25:11. This whole land shall be in desolation and an astonishment, and these nations shall serve the king of Babylon 70 years. And it shall come to pass when 70 years are accomplished that I will punish the king of Babylon, that nation, saith the Lord, for their iniquity, and the land of the Chaldeans, and will make it a perpetual desolation. Make it perpetual desolations. And I will bring upon that land all my words, which I have pronounced against it, even all that is written in this book, which Jeremiah hath prophesied against all the nations. For many nations and great kings shall serve themselves of them also. And I will recompense them according to their deeds, according to the works of their own hands. You see that in-kind payment, curse for curse? Now you notice in verse 14, he says, many nations and great kings shall serve. So Jeremiah tells them it isn't just going to be the Babylonian captivity. You're going to go to Babylon for 70 years and then you're going to get out, but you're still going to be under the heel of the Gentiles. You're still going to be in captivity. That's why Daniel chapter 2, with that image that Nebuchadnezzar sees, tells them the nations, the head of gold and so forth, those different parts of that image, are the various Gentile nations. In the book of Daniel identifies who they are, Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, and so forth, that go through there. So they know from Jeremiah, Babylon's going to come get them. That's going to be 70 years, and after that, there are going to be some more nations. That's why in Daniel 9, after the 70 years is over, he asks, how long is it going to be now? And that's when he gives them the vision of the information about the 70 weeks. So, and Daniel, of course, takes place. Jeremiah is when the captivity starts. Daniel is carried away into captivity and lives over there for those 70 years and a little longer. So the Gentiles know, Israel knows, the Edomites know, they've been put on notice by God that Israel is going to be disciplined by some Gentile nations through the captivity because of the Baal worship, because they've gone over here and forsaken God, forsook the Abrahamic covenant, and served Baal. Because they fail to honor the Abrahamic covenant, God does this. Now, if you're a Gentile, if you had any wisdom, the wise men of Teman, if you had any wisdom, you'd look at Israel and you'd say, now, if they're the people of God that he blessed and chose, and he does that to them because they did this, I don't want to do that. Because if I do that, what's he going to do to me? You know, you'd think people would get it. Now, you know they won't because you don't get it. You know, they're sinners like we are. The same flesh you got, they have. But that's the point, is that, dummy, you know, they don't pay attention. And so he says, you shouldn't have stood in the crossway to cut. When I'm dealing with them, and even when I sent you should have just stood back and say, that's what the Lord's doing, and you shouldn't have tried to stop it. The Edomites hated Israel so bad they couldn't stand it. So verse 15, he says, for the day of the Lord is near upon all the heathen. So he's going to alert them about the judgment. Now, as thou hast done, it shall be done unto thee. There's that curse for curse. thy reward shall return upon thine own head. So Edom is going to be destroyed. Their reward, they're going to have shame and slaughter because of the violence against their brethren. Verse 16, for as they have drunk upon as ye, Edom, has drunk, and what do they drink of? You go back to Jeremiah 25 and you'll see they drink of the cup of the fury of the wrath of God. How does Edom drink of the cup of the fury of the wrath of God? Ezekiel 25:14, they do it at the hand of the nation Israel. They cursed Israel. God uses Israel to curse them. They sought to destroy Israel. God will use Israel to destroy them. They sought to take Israel's land and possessions and substance. God will use Israel to take their land and possessions and substance. So he wipes them out. Just like he did that, and all the nations see that, for as ye have drunk upon my holy mountain, so shall all the heathen drink continually. As they shall drink, and they shall swallow down, and they shall be as though they had not been. That's how you know what they're drinking is judgment. If you go back over to Jeremiah 25, where we were reading a minute ago, you'll see where he talks to them in those verse 15 and following about the drinking of the cup of the fury, the wrath of God. And he uses that to destroy them. So there's two judgments. First, there's the judgment on Esau, on Edom, and then he comes back and gets all the nations. That's the second advent. That's the second coming. So you notice he says, verse 16 is kind of interesting. All the heathen shall drink continually. They shall drink, they shall swallow down. It's like it's like he forces them to drink it. They don't have any choice. And they don't just hold it in their mouth and spit it out. You know, my wife's trying to get the grandkid to take some medicine down, and he wouldn't swallow it. So she put it in his mouth, squirted it in there, held his nose, and held his mouth. Isn't that how you do it? Yeah, you moms say yeah. And he swallows it down. And she lets go, and he wails like, he's been murdered. But that's the idea. You force them to, and it's going to be just like they never were. He's going to wipe the slate so clean that, well, they'll just be has-beens. The next time we start in verse 17, go through the end of the chapter, I hope, and he's going to tell you how he's going to accomplish this. And there's some fascinating things down in verse 19 and 20 about how he's going to do some of this stuff, and we'll spend some time on that, okay? All right. Praise the Lord. Nice to see you tonight. That's what I was going to say when we started. We did the envelope stuffing earlier, and I appreciated so many of you coming to help. We got it all done, and it's a big help to have that stuff done and not have to, do it individually. So we appreciate all that. Father, we thank you tonight for your word, and thank you for the privilege of studying it. I thank you for folks like this that come out on a night like this to look into your word. I appreciate the opportunity. We rejoice in the opportunity to have the ministry to do it. All the folks that are on the internet, all across the country and even around the world that tune in, young people and old and adults and even children that enjoy watching and studying and appreciating the things that your word teaches. We thank you for your grace. We thank you for the deliverance that's in Christ Jesus from all of the stupidity and the dumbness of our flesh and of human flesh and rebellion. And we thank you for the opportunity to say that to you and to rejoice in it and to honor you because of it in Christ's name. Amen. Okay.